What is going on, everyone? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics. I came across this question recently on one of the comic Facebook groups that I'm part of. And I've noticed there actually been quite a few. I don't know if I'll say it's new people in the hobby in comics, but it's also people that are coming back into it. And it's something I feel like it's great for the hobby. You got people that collected previously that are coming back in. They're lucky they missed out on purchasing during the comic boom period, 2021 through 2023. And so they're probably, able to get books now around where we'll say their true value is, right? Like the value where, maybe books are still dropping a little bit more, but probably aren't going to drop too much more. And some we've even seen have been trending back up. But that's not what this is about. This is about this question right here. It says, does anyone sell comics now at decent/cheap/reasonable prices? It seems everyone wants FMV, i.e. full guide price. Back when I was a heavy collector, nobody paid full guide price, but these days that seems to be normal. So this person goes on to say, I think they had some comments later on where they said they collected back in the 80s and the 90s, and they were buying Silver Age and bronze and that kind of thing in that period for fractions of guide. And when somebody is talking about guide price, they're talking about overstreet, overstreet price guide. And I've talked about that before. In terms of pricing, I mean, you can kind of use it, but it's largely of no value. I mean, it's not just the fact that the prices are fixed, at one point throughout the year. It's just that if you go and look at the prices that are in there, a lot of times they just do not correspond to what the books actually sell for. So that's kind of the first thing. If you have been out of comics for a while and you remember that you used to use the Overstreet price guide to price things out, don't use that anymore. Right? Overstreet price guide does not have accurate prices. There are still some very useful things in the Overstreet price guide. I do still have one. I don't buy it every year, but I buy it occasionally so that I have like the little references that they have to, like, say, artists or key things for specific books, that kind of stuff. But for pricing, I do not use it for pricing. There are lots of other better means to identify pricing. And that's why, this person, I think, is having this confusion here, is that they are correlating the Overstreet price guide with FMV. And those are not the same thing. So when he's saying that they used to pay a fraction of guide, what they were paying was FMV. They were paying the market value for the book. What the market value for the book is what the books are actually selling for. That's the big difference. Overstreet price guide was not a guide that told you what the books were actually selling for. When somebody's talking about FMV, they are referring to something like eBay sold prices, or they're talking about this tool here, one of the tools that I use, GP analysis or GPA that most people will refer to this as. So if you looked up, say, Amazing Spider-Man number 300, new one on here, and these are going to be graded prices because that's how they can give you the actual prices, is because they know what the grade was of the book and they can correlate that to the the book itself, and then you get some averages and all that kind of stuff. So but if we look up Amazing Spider-Man 300, when we're looking at these prices for this book, this isn't talking about the Overstreet price guide price. Like, you aren't going to be able to go up to someone and be like, oh, like, this is the guide price, $2,500, I'll give you half of that. No, because this is what the book actually sells for. This is what a 9.8 of this book sells for. The 90-day average has been 2,600. The 12-month average, 2,661. The 2024 average, 2,830. 2023 average, 3,645. Here, and if you're new back into comics or whatever, this is what I was talking about with that big spike in prices and the trend back down. I'm not going to get into all the details with that here, but this is what we're talking about with the difference between FMV. Like, this is what you would probably call FMV, the 90-day average. That's likely what I would use, just given the fact that prices are still dropping in a lot of books. Now, if you're talking about something like Golden Age book, doesn't sell quite as often, you can't use a 90-day average, obviously. But for a more modern book, a copper book like this that sells all the time, you can see this 20 sales just in the last 90 days that have been recorded here. You can use that. You could probably say the 90-day average is FMV. So if somebody's asking around $2,600 for the book, that's what it sells for. And that's why you can't just walk up and be like, oh, can you give this to me for $1,500? Because then if they sold you that for $1,500, you just go right away and sell it for $2,600, because that is the going price for the book. And so that's that's the big difference here, is that I think, this person is thinking that Overstreet is the same as FMV, and it just is not. That is not the case. Now, there are a lot of different sources that you can use to get this pricing information. GPA is my favorite. That's my favorite one to use. It's just, I think it tends to have the most data, and it gives me, I don't know, it operates very quickly. So if I want to price a lot of stuff, it's just a lot quicker. It doesn't have a lot of extras in it. It's just the pricing, and it's, these little charts, and that's pretty much it. Now, I do also like GoCollect quite a bit. The big reason I like GoCollect, one big part is the pictures. So if we look at Amazing Spider-Man number 300, and we look, and this will probably take a little bit longer to load once we go into it, because it's just got a lot more pictures that it takes to load this up. But if we go and look at the 9.8s for CGC, and we let this load, actually loaded pretty quick, pretty happy with that. You actually see that we can see the picture that goes with each one. Now with a 9.8, it's not really a big difference. A 9.8 is going to generally look pretty nice no matter what. You might have some small differences between them. Like there might be some that have a little bit darker red on the cover, and some that maybe have a slightly better wrap, like a more aligned wrap. But when you get down into lower grades, that's where you may see big discrepancies in price, where I don't know if I'm gonna be able to come across one here, but let's say we get down to, say, like a 4.0, and there could be a 4.0 that, one day sells for, you can see 250, and one day sells for 164. And it could be that one that went for 164 had a huge crease down the middle of the front cover, but the one that went for 250, maybe it had a bunch of damage to the back cover. And so it actually presents a lot better. And so you could have some price differences, some big price differences based on the presentation of the book. And that's one of the really nice things with GoCollect, is that you can actually see the actual book that's sold. There are some other nice features that GoCollect has added that I'll probably, I'll show you one of them. One that I think is pretty interesting that they added recently. But GoCollect, GPA, they're giving you the actual sold prices. You can see here on GoCollect, they actually refer to it as the FMV, and it looks like they're 2,600. I don't know if that exactly corresponds, with the 90-day or what, but you can see how we have 2,600 here for the 90-day average. And so they generally are going to get you a very similar information. So I would say you should at least have one of these. I know some people, and I talk about this all the time, I complain about it all the time, and I know I'm just never going to win this. Comic collectors, on average, are just super cheap, and they cheap out on the wrong things, and they go, well, can't I just use eBay sold prices for this? I don't want to pay for this. Can't I use Hip Comic? And, can't I use whatever else, whatever free services out there? No, don't use the free services. Pay for something and get an actual, good representative set of that data. Yes, if you're only buying super modern books, you can probably get by with something like eBay. But once you start getting to anything that's a little bit older, I just highly recommend, using one of these services. And even that, like eBay is just going to have the eBay sold prices. It's not going to have where it sold or what it sold for on Heritage or Comic Connect or Hakes or wherever else, My Comic Shop, that kind of stuff. Like, do you really want to go and search around on all those different sites just to try to save a few bucks a month? Like, just pay for the service. Pay for it. It's not that expensive. And if you overpay by, say, $100 for a book, that's like almost a year's worth of the service. I mean, it's just worthwhile to get one of these services. I will keep saying it till I'm blue in the face, but I know it's just, comic collectors are they're so cheap, and they're cheap on the wrong things. And this is one of the things that you should not cheap out on. Now, I have talked about eBay a number of times. You can use eBay sold listings. You do always have to be a little cautious with eBay sold listings, though. So if we go to Amazing Spider-Man number 300, it's 1988. And so if you look at eBay, sometimes people will go to the actual listed prices. Don't use those. You want to use the actual sold listings. So you'll go down and you'll filter based on more filters. Oh, there it is. I filter based on sold items. And so this will tell you the sold prices. Now, the thing you have to be aware of is that if it's an auction, like if you see that it was some type of auction, let's like 28 bids here, you can say that this sold for 350. That is for certain. Now, if somebody accepted an offer, it may have a strike through or it may not. I'm actually surprised to see a strike through because I thought those had been completely removed. Maybe it's because this is in Canada. I don't know. But a lot of times people will accept offers through the eBay's messaging system, and that does not show up on here. It'll show up as a full price sale. So you do need to make sure that you use either, I've shown it before, you use the eBay research tool to actually get the actual sold price, or use something like 130 point where you put in the actual listing, you search for the listing here and it'll give you the actual sold price. So just know that you could be misled with some of these eBay ones, whereas the actual sold price will be here on GPA. It is not always on GoCollect, so be aware of that. And that's why they'll have like the strike throughs here as well and that kind of thing. But GPA will have the actual sold prices. That's why I like to have both of them. I think when you have both of them, it gives you the best overall picture of how everything is going. Now, if you want to use one of the services that's actually, I think, the best one for actually tracking the value of your collection, I would go with Cover Price, and that also gives you an estimated value for raw sales too. So that's another big plus with Cover Price. But for me, for largely for graded books, is what I'm looking at. I'm generally using GPA and GoCollect. Now, one thing I'll also show you one of the nice pluses that was recently added on GoCollect, and it's an interesting one. I feel like it's going to be abused, and you're going to have misrepresentations on prices with it, but it is still a nice feature. I feel like the idea behind it is good, but I'm interested to see how it actually comes into play with actual usage. And so what GoCollect added recently was, what they added was, if we look up, let's look up All American number 16. So this is the first appearance of Green Lantern. And I talked about this in the recent video I had because there's one coming up for sale on Heritage. And one of the people asked, I said that even though if we go to, let's look it up here too. So we go All American number 16. And you can see here for All American 16, there have been 2 restored sales within the last 2 years, but there have been no universal sales within the last 2 years. Last one was in 2020. This also says that it doesn't have any signed sales. However, there was a signed sale last year, and it was on Comic Link. And the only reason I know about it is because I was watching that one. And that's why I talk about these Comic Link sales, that unless you were watching it from the perspective of the value of the book, they didn't really happen. And I know that gets some people really worked up. They get upset about that, but most people don't know about the sale. Unless you were watching it, you don't know what happened. But I happen to be watching this one. And so you can go back and look at prior auction results. I knew when the sale happened. It was in August of last year. So we look at the August sale. And because someone was asking in that prior video how I found this, and I knew when it sold. And so then I just scroll down to, you can't use a search. The search, you can't find it with search. Like none of that works on here. But you can find it through here if they happen to be showing it. And here's that sale. So here's this sale on Comic Link for, well, load eventually. We'll just stay over here for now, for $61,069. All right. I wanted this to load so I can get the date it sold. So it sold on 8/27. If we go over to GoCollect, one of the new features that they added was crowd reported sales. So you can add in sales that don't get pulled in. Comic Link sales do not get pulled into GoCollect or GPA. They're also saying you could use it for private sales, like at a con or whatever else. But you need to have you're supposed to have some type of proof of the sale. So I'm going to report a sale. You can see there's none in here. So let's report that sale here. And so we know the date of the sale was the 27th of October. So we go, let's do it this way. So we'll go October 27th, or was it August? Sorry, August. I don't know why I had October, but exactly, I could have gotten that wrong. But so we go August 27th of 2024. The sold price was $61,069. So 61069. The format was an auction. Venue was an online auction house. They do not have Comic Link listed here, so we say other. Then we do Comic Link. Then we go, let's see. I'm gonna make sure I put that in right. It's probably one word. I don't know. We'll do one word. Comic Link. Then they want the URL for the sale, so we copy that here. Put the URL in for the sale, and now we put in the certification company was CGC. The label was a signature series. The grade was a 1.8. What's the page quality? Page quality is cream to off-white. So page quality is cream to off-white, and submit sale. And now we have a record, $61,069. Now, the one thing I will say is that this doesn't get pulled into like the CGC sales here. Like you won't see it here. You won't see it in the search. What I would propose that where they add it is, I can understand maybe not wanting to put it in here where it ends up in the FMVs like CGC or CBCS, but I would also add it into this search list and make it clear that it is a crowd reported sale. But I think it should be put here because I think the likelihood that people are actually going to check over here is relatively low. But I would probably add it in here. That would be my one piece of my one recommendation, my little piece of advice for GoCollect is to add that in. Oh, look, they do have 1.5 that's sold on Golden for 73,000. Yeah, that was back in 2023, though. A little bit more in the comic boom. I did feel like this sale was a bit of a deal. I was actually surprised we didn't see it pop up again since they don't get pulled in. Sometimes, this is a place where dealers like to buy, and then they'll, because they know the sale doesn't get pulled in, it'll pop up someplace else. But these are some different things to be aware of. If you're new back into comics, you're new into comics completely, you're wondering about pricing, you're wondering about deals, that kind of stuff, why people come up with the prices that they do. These sites are great reference points. Now, you just got to remember, there are some books that you can argue for FMV. There are other ones where it doesn't make as much sense. So for example, like the Amazing Spider-Man 300, like I said, like that book sells all the time. It's probably going to sell around that FMV value. If you've got something like All American 16, yeah, whoever bought this bought it for $61,069, but they might tell you, you want this book, you're going to pay me $90,000 for it. And otherwise, I'm not going to sell it. And you're not going to be able to go like, oh, but the last one sold for $61,000. It's like, yeah, too bad. There hasn't been one that's sold, universal. Well, other than that Golden now that I see there's been one in the last 5 years. So you can wait or you can pay what I want. So FMV is one of those things where it's like, depending on the era, the book, that kind of thing, the meaning can vary. And so, yeah, the FMV for this book is $61,000 or $61,069 because that's the sold price, the last sold price. But I highly doubt the person that bought this would ever let you, if you wanted to buy it from them, buy it for that price. So just something to consider out there. But hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit that like button, subscribe button, notification bell, and I will see you on the next one.